Welcome back to the stage, Pat Duffy, the co-founder of the Giving Block, and he's going to intro our incredible panelists here today.
It's too much me. Hello to everyone here at the summit. I'm excited for this panel. This is one we've been building to all day. I'm excited to have the speakers here. Just going to do a rundown of everyone we've got here. So I'm Pat Duffy, co-founder of the Giving Block. We've got Hilary Engelbrecht, Director of Fundraising Services, DNL OmniMedia. We've got Mark Cross, Director of Revenue Operations at GoodUnited. And we've got Garrison Breckenridge, Product Manager, focusing on cryptocurrency and NFTs at the American Cancer Society, one of the best crypto fundraising programs in the country, if I do say so myself. Good to have you all here. Awesome. So to kick off the panel, just this conversation about the future of donor engagement, I'd like to first hear from everybody here on what innovative fundraising platforms or techniques have you found the most effective, especially as of late, for engaging with new donor demographics? And just out of respect to everyone in the audience who's been here all day, I'll ask that nobody say the Giving Block and talk about something different. Not that you were anyway, but I'll start with you, Hilary.
Yeah, sure. So I feel like we're in a really exciting time for fundraising platforms. I never thought that I would say that, but there's a lot of new feature-rich technologies out there, which in turn is also driving legacy platforms to start building more, adding new features so that they can keep up. So I feel like nonprofits have more options than ever. I've worked on a couple of projects lately where we're engaging the mission team to bring their data back into donor databases so that we can use that to hyper ask our donors and have them pick exactly which mission project they want to support. And then that allows us to, when the project status gets updated to in progress or complete, we can automatically trigger those notifications back out to those donors. So it's been really fun to see how development and programs teams are breaking down silos and working together to really communicate with their donors.
That's awesome. I remember those problems from my time working at
Hmm.
nonprofits. How about you, Garrison, in terms of innovative platforms? Oh, Garrison, you might be on mute.
Oh, is that better?
There we go. Yeah, we
All
got
right,
you.
there we go. Yeah, like so, the focus of my work is definitely on crypto fundraising, but I can say that um, some interesting platforms that we're exploring um, span like the social fundraising space. That's a very key interest of ours to reaching like younger demographics for sure. But then also donor advised funds using solutions like Chariot, which the Given Block is also partnered with. Um, to reach, was it $234 billion, sitting in DAF accounts right now. So yeah, there's a lot of incredible platforms out there that span, all donor demographics.
That's awesome. I know you guys have plugged in with a lot of things that we're kind of have as satellite companies too, like endowments and other ways to take crypto gifts and how they all plug in and expand the horizons. I'm also super stoked about Chariot. I think they're going to be one of our best integrations. And then Mark, your thoughts on innovative platforms?
Yeah, the platforms I think that are most exciting to us are the ones that we don't currently think about today in terms of places to raise money or to accept donations. So, Good United for most of our history has kind of been intertwined with Facebook and Facebook fundraising. Really, at the heart of our mission is how do we help nonprofits bring all of the stewardship best practices that we've been using for direct mail and email and SMS for years? How do we bring that to the places where people spend time? So, specifically on social. If you think about that as the mission of Good United and the possibilities for donations and donation platforms, what we often think about is if Facebook went away tomorrow, or if Instagram went away, if a president were to sign into law a bill banning a social media app in kind of a weird twist of fate, which would probably never happen in 2024, where would those supporters who support nonprofits go? Our belief is that they would not go back to the websites that those nonprofits own and control, as much as we would like them to. Most likely, they're going to go to whatever social platform is next. So if you think about where are people likely to give and engage, how do we build a bridge into sites like LinkedIn? And leveraging, we've seen some really interesting use cases of people finding major donations via LinkedIn or corporate sponsorships. How do we think about TikTok or whatever the next social platform is? But really the kind of exciting thing for us is to think about, as the giving landscape changes, not just how are people donating, but where are they giving? And then how do we become a bridge to connect with them in those places where they spend time?
I think it's a great point. Internet getting more siloed, even though it's supposed to bring everyone together. Those communities, are changing all the time. And of course, over the last couple of years, social platforms getting politicized and new ones kind of coming into the fold that are just kind of percolating on the edges. It's going to be interesting to see how the whole landscape unfolds. Back to you, Hilary, a question for you. At DNL OmniMedia, you specialize in working with nonprofits and helping them determine what tools are actually the best fit for their organizations. And we know there are a ton of tools out there, especially in terms of like meeting the needs of all the different types of donors. So when you think about nonprofits today, how can they prepare for and adapt to the evolving expectations of donors, particularly younger generations that don't make up the majority of the donor base currently, but should as time goes on?
Yeah, sure. So when we say younger generations, I'm thinking millennials and I'm thinking Gen Z. We know that nonprofits are starting to see an increase in realized gifts from planned giving. And we also know that by 2030, millennials are going to hold 5 times the amount of wealth that they have today. We know that studies show that they're giving and that they want to continue to give more. About Gen Z, they're starting to build wealth. They're very passionate about nonprofit organizations. While they might not be giving yet, they're advocating, they're volunteering, and they're influencing. So they're starting to really pick their charities of choice. And I think it's really important that nonprofits try to get in front of these generations early to start that whole entire life cycle of giving. In the chat, if you have any other good insights about those generations, please feel free to drop them. But my advice to appealing for them, I think first, I think that's a theme of the day, is giving options. So mobile wallets, donor advised funds, crypto, they all have to be available to those generations of donors. It's something that they just expect baseline. Next would be ease. So as a millennial myself, I am great at online shopping. And you might not know it, but a lot of your e-commerce uses multiple payment methods. It's just the user experience is so great that you don't notice it. So I always recommend that nonprofits try couch donating. So they sit on their couch with just their cell phone, no credit card, pretend like they're completely new and determine, was that easy? What needs to be improved? And try that exercise and think about that when you're shopping at your favorite stores, what they do and how you can bring that over to your checkout experience. And then lastly, integrations. So any of these new platforms that we're adding have to get back to your donor database. It's something that we are working on every day with our clients, is making sure that anytime somebody gives crypto, that's going back into their CRM so that they can follow up and steward their donors.
That's an awesome rundown. We have the first hire that we hired at the Giving Block used to use a website called The User is Drunk, and we'd always use that as a point of reference for like trying to see like, will they find their way to the giving option? Do they understand what you do, what you care about, the dollar for dollar metrics? I think all of that is insightful. I like the couch donating. Mark, on the GoodUnited front, one thing that I think is awesome about GoodUnited is how it complements the nonprofit's existing fundraising program and then creates new ones. So by turning social networks into donor networks, GoodUnited is able to expand the nonprofit's role in fundraising. So when you think about the influencers and the ambassadors, what are the roles that they're playing in the GoodUnited approach when it comes to donor engagement on social media platforms specifically?
As a person who went to a liberal arts school, I appreciate that Hilary started by clarifying the language that we use when we say younger generations, because I'm going to do the same and challenge when we say influencer and ambassador. We've seen a lot of great content recently in the fundraising space. For anyone who was at the peer-to-peer forum, there was a great presentation about live stream fundraising and how to connect with influencers who will help drive donations for your organization. And that's often when people say influencers or ambassadors, we're thinking about people who have massive networks who can put on some sort of event and then influence people to go and make donations. We actually recently worked with a large Canadian organization who they had been doing live stream fundraising for about 5 or 6 years. And one of the things that they were finding was that there was increased competition among the influencers, or I believe the term is creator nowadays, and that the creator economy has really been latched onto by nonprofits, and especially the really influential ones. They're getting more requests from nonprofits. In response to that, they're doing more live streaming events and asking their networks to give. Well, we're running into the saturation problem that we have ran into before, which is these live stream gamers or influencers are constantly reaching kind of these same networks with more asks for more types of events. So I mention all of that as context, that question of how do we think about it. The way that we helped kind of reimagine it for them is influencers is on its smallest level the same way that we've thought for years about peer-to-peer fundraising. How well can we influence the network of those people around us? And actually relates, I think, something to what Hilary was talking about with younger generations. And we found that on social as well, is that the younger generations, especially those who enjoy live stream fundraising, gaming, who are part of this new creator economy that's being stood up, while they themselves aren't the wealthiest people or personas in our network, their parents, their aunts, their uncles, the people who want to support them are. So we've actually found this really interesting space in terms of influencers and ambassadors, which is, if we reimagine that and think of the people who want to support our organization, if our call to action wasn't through a single influencer, but instead was a group of people to say, turn on your Twitch stream, go live on Facebook, go live on Instagram, and then ask your network to make a donation. If we do that at a large enough scale, even if that influencer doesn't have the largest network, if they have 3, 4, 5 people who are willing to make a small donation, we can have a huge impact. We're also running into this two-bird situation where not only are we bringing in revenue to support the organization, we're getting that one-to-one interaction with the fundraiser, who then we can continue to cultivate and tell them about all of the great things that we as an organization do. So it's no longer that, I'm going to date myself with this reference, this Sophie's choice about, do we get people who are younger or do we get people who are older and have money and want to make donations? In this situation, we can have both. We can engage with those people who are influencers on their own small level, and we can bring in revenue from their networks who are willing to support them.
I think that's an awesome point. We tell nonprofits a lot on the crypto front, just as a quick aside, when they're trying to get into crypto or NFTs, whatever it might be. Just ask your audience if people are into it. I can tell you how many nonprofits, not only to your point about like finding a fundraiser or growing your audience, but like they're trying to get good at something like TikTok or crypto fundraising or into this NFT space. Sometimes you have these, art studios in New York, and they just send out an email. They're like, who's into this NFT stuff? Like, who can help us get out there? And then you find this person, to your point, who's like really into it. They can bring their friends, they can throw an event, they can get other people involved. It's a great opportunity to just ask people in your audience, like who wants to be, to your point, redefining influencer ambassador, someone who can help us get better at something in addition to fundraising on behalf of the organization. Takes me over to Garrison at ACS. So with the American Cancer Society, you've obviously done an awesome job tapping into emerging donor networks, you in particular on the crypto philanthropy front. For an organization of that size, right? Like how does ACS balance the traditional fundraising methods that have built such a huge foundation with all these emerging digital platforms that are helping you grow the donor reach, the engagement? How are you maintaining that personal connection, right, with these donors in this digital world where you're expanding so rapidly?
Yeah, it's a continued process of like exploration and adaptation, to the nonprofit landscape. Donor trends change, how people give or how people prefer to give changes. And then there's also like different approaches to like what donor demographics do you want to more like proactively cultivate. Like at ACS, our donor and volunteer demographics trend older. So there is definitely like a concerted push to be able to reach younger generations. And part of that is exploring new tools, meeting donors where they're at. And, a lot of the same processes of traditional fundraising apply to digital tools, right? You want to establish a connection, you want to cultivate and steward relationships over time, build out your donor file. That's the goal that every nonprofit has, to have that continued sustained support over many years. And if you can establish that relationship when donors or volunteers are, younger, you have many, many years ahead of, continued support. To the second question about how to maintain that personal connection with digital platforms, I'll take a slightly different spin to it and shift to like the crypto specific lens. And I'll say that that's kind of an open question, right? Like, how do you cultivate a space that has such a high prevalence of anonymous donors? If you don't have a name or even an email to bring into your donor file, you don't really have a lot of material to work with. So one of the ways you can kind of like do donor acknowledgement is to like showcase the impact of, a particular large, gift that comes in, broadcast that on your social media channels. That's a great way to kind of like, showcase impact. And maybe someone will say, hey, that was actually a contribution that our project made. And then you can actually have something to, bring into your donor file. But in terms of like the kind of the one-to-one relationship over time with crypto, it's tricky. I do think there are ways to use the tools of the trade in this space to be able to have like a more dynamic donor experience and have like that cultivation and stewardship cycle. But I think it's pretty early days. It's a core focus of research of mine this year as to how to like bridge that gap. But the same strategies apply. If you do get information on a donor or a volunteer, bring them into your donor file and, steward that relationship.
That's super insightful. It ties back. We had Peter from the Water Project on with a panel earlier and made a very similar comment to the one you just made, where it's sort of like, if you don't know who the donors are, you just celebrate the gift across your channels. And then the donor is that not only do other donors see that and inspires additional giving, but they've also had rapid follow-up gifts from the same wallet address as a result of that, where it's this very interesting, to your point, song and dance, where there is no direct understanding of who the individual is or where the gift came from, but you've actually kind of celebrated them without even having their contact information and stewarded a second gift just by virtue of highlighting that the gift is happening. And then the second piece of that is, of course, like a line makes a line, right? And my dad says it about delis, but it's true about fundraising. Like these big donations, you don't have to always say who the donor is, but like, we got this exciting donation. Look, people are supporting us. Like sometimes it's all the social proof that donors need. I think that's awesome. I want to, circle back to you now again, Hilary, from the your experience working with nonprofits at DNL. What are some of the common challenges that you're seeing nonprofits experiencing when it comes to utilizing peer-to-peer fundraising specifically? And what are some of the ways that you're working together to work around them?
Yeah. And peer-to-peer fundraising has grown so much. We have the old school events, the run walks, where you're asking your family and friends to donate because you're participating in something. We have shorter DIY, celebrating something like a birthday or a milestone. We have live streaming. There's, peer-to-peer is like its own thing, and it has so many different facets to it. So I'm going to break them out just a little bit. Traditionally, with the traditional type events, we know that that's Gen X is doing a great job on that. They're on Facebook, they're asking their friends and families. So our focus there has really been refining and making it easy to register, creating family traditions so that they'll bring in younger generations by making the registration process super, super easy to register your whole entire family in one transaction instead of having to wait for everybody to do it on their own. For them, we're also trying to leverage AI to help with simple back-end things because peer-to-peer teams are generally pretty small. So using ChatGPT to create fundraising handbooks that will then just personalize, or using Canva to create personalized images that they can share. So we're starting to incorporate that in our peer-to-peer fundraising to free up staff time. For younger generations, I think that we mentioned the people remaining anonymous and really highlighting what's been done. We're using that first to acquire those peer-to-peer donors, no matter how they're coming in. So allowing them to see a selectable list of projects that have different price points associated with them that they can choose to fund. When they select that project, it goes away, so it's unique to that person. And then they receive those project updates. So it converts those, one-time birthday Facebook fundraisers into somebody who might do a birthday and a couple of other events because they're trying to really make a bigger impact and support something larger for their nonprofits.
I love that. I think it's interesting to think about how it all continues to expand over time. I think just circling back to you, Mark, on the on data being an incredibly valuable tool for nonprofits right now. It can also be super overwhelming in terms of the different sources, how they're using it, with the vast amount of data that's available right now to nonprofits, both within their CRM and outside of it. How does GoodUnited take analytics and optimize the donor engagement strategies based on what you're seeing?
Yeah, I don't want to understate the word vast in that statement there. We were actually just kind of putting together a case study for a nonprofit today and giving some generalized impact information about GoodUnited. Since 2018, we've had our nonprofits have engaged with over 6 million supporters in Facebook Messenger. So in that social channel, so 6 million unique individuals we've had conversations with. I was even taking a look at it. Might be news to Garrison. American Cancer Society alone today has over 150,000 people who are engaged in Facebook Messenger. Those open rates there are, because of that channel, and it really hasn't fallen victim to spam, the open rates there are 99%. Again, mention all that context because we can ask for whatever data point we want. This was a realization probably 4 years ago with myself at GoodUnited and sitting around the table with some nonprofit partners, just going through thought exercises. And that question of can we ask someone, to Hilary's point, can we ask a birthday fundraiser to donate? Can we ask them to become a recurring donor? Can we ask them to attend an in-person event? Yes, you can. You can ask them literally any question, and that becomes quickly overwhelming when we get really into the analytics and thinking through like, what do we want to know about our supporters? Because if we knew X, Y, and Z, we'd be able to stand up this really new and different fundraising experience, or roll out this thing that's really cool. Your rant might be on there, Pat. I just saw your the way that we've incorporated, or really the position that we've taken from it, is to, as simple as it sounds, not overthink that. We talked to an organization last year, and we said, over the past year, we've worked together. We've acquired 30,000 new supporters. And one of the responses from someone in the crowd was kind of, yeah, but those people that we've acquired from social media are not really valuable. They don't give again. And our question was like, fair. Like, when we said that they don't give again, meaning like no one gave, and what did we ask them to do? And the answers were, I think, devastating but unsurprising, in that they had taken all of the email addresses and uploaded them to a CRM, and we didn't tag them individually. So the first part of that is like, we can't report on whether or not those 30,000 people came back, because we didn't even indicate where they came from in the first place and separate that reporting out. The next question is like, what did we ask them to do? Well, among that were thousands of fundraisers. There were also many donors. There were people who were just page visitors, and people who participated in a virtual event but didn't fundraise or donate. And we're kind of putting them all into the same sequence. So I know it's a question about analytics, and like, hey, if we could find the age and their interest in gaming, we could probably find the next biggest crypto donor who's lying in wait. Or we could just, to your point earlier, Pat, like, we could just ask, like, if you donated as a part of a gaming challenge or fundraised as a part of a gaming challenge, we could just say, would you want to donate? Would you be interested in donating crypto? Would you be interested in becoming a recurring donor? The point being, like, separate and find out. First of all, just make sure that you're tracking the inbound source of all of this data, especially when we're talking about social. Did they create a fundraiser? Did they make a donation? Again, seems obvious, but a nuanced question. When they made a donation, did they donate to Pat's fundraiser, or did they donate to the American Cancer Society? Because the continued conversation with both of those people is distinctly different. If I donated to Pat's fundraiser, I'm probably going to have to be cultivated a little bit more, taught more about the organization and what they do and why it's important and why you should give again. But also, if I gave directly to the American Cancer Society, think of them lower in a marketing funnel, right? They've already given, they've already taken an action. You don't have to tell them, like, you don't need to build out a 6-message sequence about everything that's great about your organization. Just say, thank you so much for the donation. Here's what we were able to do with it. Here's the next opportunity to engage. So the response to that question of, like, how do you not make it not be overwhelming? Think of it in the simplest forms of, like, how did these people come to you? What's the continued conversation that you want to have? And then what's the next logical, ask that we can make of these people based on how they met us and in what capacity they supported the first time around. There was a classic, I believe it was Classy, who I still pull this image up from like 4 years ago in one of their peer-to-peer fundraising reports. And it was simply, what was your first action with the organization versus what was your second action? So did you attend an event with a paid registration? Did you fundraise with an unpaid registration? Was it a one-time donation? Was it a recurring donation? Was the x-axis? The y-axis was all of those same things. And they just heat mapped, what were you likely to do the second time? And, like, again, this seems very dumb, but we miss this point all the time, which is, like, if you gave on Facebook one time to the organization, by far the most likely action that you're going to take the next time is to give one time to that organization on Facebook. And so, like, begin by understanding what was the first action that they took, and then ask them to take that same action in that same place through that same channel. And we will all be shocked at how our retention statistics turn around year over year.
That's a super good rundown. In general, I feel like, yeah, a lot of nonprofits are trying to ramp donors into the next action, right? Versus kind of doubling back to the thing that kind of worked the first time, trying to get a couple wins more consistently before moving on to the next thing. I think there's a lot of market research across industries too, that like if you try to get people to take that same smaller action a few times before trying to move up to the next thing, it's like systematically better in nonprofits in like all sectors. Um, just super insightful. I want to just do one more question for you, Garrison, before we go to some questions for everybody and hit the Q&A. Everyone who's online right now, please make sure you get some questions in for everybody so we hit those at the end. But from your experience with American Cancer, right, can you share some successful examples of utilizing crypto philanthropy specifically to support a specific initiative or campaign? And then how you approach this campaign differently compared to your more traditional fundraisers. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Most recent example would be late last year, we did a partnership activation with Gitcoin. Gitcoin is an open source software organization that has a very high profile in the crypto space. They focus on funding public goods. Those public goods tend to be software projects within the blockchain space, but they pioneered a interesting method of like community driven match funding called quadratic funding. So we launched our own campaign that we supplied the match pool, and a crowdfunding campaign was done that benefited 6 distinct ACS mission support programs. And the way it works is those donations function as votes for how that match pool is allocated. So it's kind of an interesting, like community directed match funding that's more accessible and not as easily like absorbed by like whale donors that have a huge overwhelming impact on how funds are allocated. And I think that's a really interesting example of engaging with kind of impact oriented systems within this industry that really kind of provide crypto donors like a way to engage with the tools that they use. It's a little different from like more intermediary giving solutions. It's all direct, it's all on chain, transparent, verifiable, all the flows of the funds. And we were able to use our existing donation infrastructure with the given block to be able to process that at the very end like of the activation. And I think the different approach to that was in 2 ways. One, we had 6 different programs that people could decide to support. And I think a lot of nonprofits don't do that a lot, where it's like, oh, here's 6 different programs at this organization. Decide which one resonates with you the most and direct your contribution there. Like there are restricted gifts, but I think with like a fundraising activation, there's usually not multiple options there just on the table. So that was a distinct element, which is very useful because you can use that information to determine where does this donor profile, like what programs seem to most resonate with them. Is it research? Is it patient support, like free lodging, free transportation, whatever it is. And yeah, I think it was a really interesting experiment in like finding what's the sentiment of the community, like what resonates with them the most, and having like public data that anyone could, look at and verify it. So it was really interesting.
I think that's awesome. crypto is seen, I think, always as such a source for unrestricted funds because of the anonymity component and because so much funding happens that is unrestricted. I think just because of the ease of use and wallet to wallet transfers and all that good stuff. But I do think, like you're saying, the optionality not only on the programs and everything, where you can have people really self-select into alternate options and even have different wallets tied to each of those. The traceability of it is really easy and simple on the nonprofit side and from the donor side. But then even combining that with things like, do you want the nonprofit to hold the crypto or sell the crypto, right? You can generate all of these kind of different actions and data points that the donor can give you as they're going through the chain. And then the actual funding sources can be self-selected off into those different areas rather than having to sort it out on the back end. Just super efficient. I thought that was a really cool fundraiser they all did. All right, cool. We've got other questions here that we prepare in advance, but I think, we've got the last 25 minutes or so here. Like, I'd love to just make sure we get to everybody's questions in the Q&A, if that works for everybody. Cool. Okay, so we'll hit on those. If we have other time, we can hit on some of the other stuff that we were ready to run through. So first question that we've got here is from Terry. It says, I would love to know more about how different orgs connect with social media donors. So I guess we can start with Mark on this one, but I'm sure everyone's here got insights on it.
Yeah. So the first thing to mention, I don't know how much everyone knows that over the last 2 years, like Meta especially has changed the way that people can opt into sharing information and then where that information can be found on Facebook. So this was not the case probably 3 years ago, but today, for anyone who creates a fundraiser or makes a donation on the Facebook platform, so whether on Meta on Facebook or on Instagram, the default permissions have changed so that they are automatically default opted in to follow your page, to share their email address, and to opt in to communicate via Messenger. One of the really interesting things about the way the whole payment process works with Meta Giving Tools is if you're on the Facebook app, you actually go out to Safari or to your browser to make that donation because donation amounts that are processed in the app would actually have to pay a fee to the Apple Store or Google Play Store. So they take you out of that experience to a browser to complete the transaction, and then they bring you back into Facebook. What that means is that while not every single person is opting in to share their email address and agree to communicate via Messenger, previously, none of those default permissions were selected, and it was actually really difficult to share your information. So because of that, you can actually go, if your nonprofit is approved with Facebook Giving Tools, you can go into the nonprofit manager page. There is a supporters tab. Admittedly, this is organized in a really poor fashion, but what you can see are people who have created fundraisers, who have made donations, those who have shared their email address, and those who have agreed to communicate with your nonprofit in Messenger. So if you're doing that, if you're getting fundraisers that are being created for you, if you have donations that are being processed on that Meta platform, go and check it out and see the size and scale and scope of it. If you just want to respond one-to-one in Messenger, you can do that. If you want to capture those email addresses and put them into your CRM, it makes it a little bit easier. Obviously, if it's happening more at scale or you want to be more intentional about it, shameless plug, that's really the world that GoodUnited occupies. But yeah.
That's awesome. You can jump to other questions. Unless Hilary, Garrison, you want to tack anything onto that? Okay. Got a great question. That's a direct dig at me, which is, I would love to know, where do we go? Now it's at the top. Any other disruptive fundraising strategies that you recommend that don't involve crypto? I think we hit on a lot of them here, but start with Hilary.
Sure. So I think we've mentioned a couple of things. I think that Garrison said it best when, it doesn't matter how much we move the donor cycle over to technologies. It's really about creating that connection with people. And then I think some of the disruptiveness is around just meeting your donors and those younger generations where they are. So that's where things really change. But I think it's really about taking some of the tried and true things that we know about fundraising and seeing how we can digitize them. So, I think taking care of some of the headaches that nonprofit staff see every day with automations and AI, using that to take away some of those headaches is going to increase employee retention so that they can spend more one-on-one in-person time with their donors.
I love it. It's a good point in general too, where technology really should be helping you get back to fundraising, right? It's
Right.
freeing up time to focus on other things. So the time is in and of itself valuable as an outcome.
Yep.
We've got one for Mark, which is I'm dying to know what the rest of that poster says behind Mark.
I often forget. So this is one of our co-founder, Jeremy Berman. This is his office. I'm going the wrong way. It takes talent, and that's crossed out, and then it says tenacity. There is a series of inspirational. It's like the expletive success rates called Good Effing Advice is the brand. If you follow them on social, there's a lot of that content. We are notoriously not safe for children around here. These are things I need to remember when I hop on events like this. So apologies if that's offensive, but that's the poster.
I think it's okay. I think we can all handle it. I like that you direct it to someone else's office, though.
Yeah,
God forbid.
If you have complaints, direct them to Jeremy at GoodUnited.io, and be sure to be explicit about that.
I like it. Michael early on our team has a poster from that store that has a series of expletives that we said would have to be moved to a different wall if he wanted to maintain his role as a direct communicator with donors. It's very funny. Let me see. Next question. Well, this is, kind of a straightforward one. Is the contact info now shared for those who donate through Facebook as well as the one who sets up the fundraiser? I don't know the answer to this one.
Yeah, it is both, which is also new. It used to be in order to share an email address, if you're making creating a fundraiser or making a donation on Facebook, you'd have to make that donation, then click a box to share your email, and then kind of like progress forward. So for fundraisers especially, you would have to you'd have to create the fundraiser, then make a donation, then share your email. So historically, it was like fewer than 1%. Today, that process is a lot easier. I would say if you haven't done it in a while, if your organization is approved through Meta Giving tools, do like a screen recording and just go look, create a fundraiser, make a donation, see what that process is. Facebook has really evolved their outro experience after you create the fundraiser and you make a donation, what they're asking you to do and how they coach you along. It's not only great to see, just to understand, what information people are sharing and how they do that, but to something that Hilary pointed out earlier about, seeing those shopping experiences that you really love. I can tell you that what Facebook does better than any fundraising platform on earth is it is very simple. It's very simple to create a fundraiser. It's very simple to make a donation. And so if you want the kind of picture perfect ideal of the easiest supporter experience in the world. Now, the trade-off of that is you're not getting a ton, you're not asking about their physical address and whether or not what their t-shirt size is, and if they'd be interested in other programs that you have. It's very limited, but it is a very seamless experience. And I would encourage everybody to go and kind of take a look at what that is.
That's great. I'm a big fan of staggering all that stuff and letting donors opt into what's useful. I think the conversion rates are worth it. I know there's a lot of contention around that topic in the nonprofit sector, but I love stuff like that where you set up a fundraiser real fast. And then I think it should be easier though on Facebook to just tick a box. If Facebook has a lot of that information that you could just share everything with the nonprofit rather than filling out some fields. But other than that, I think they do a really nice job. have a good question now. Oh yeah.
I'll tag it and say we brought that up to them. The Cambridge Analytica stuff has really turned them off to oversharing data that they're not, that they don't have to. So for anybody who's wondering, like, Facebook knows a lot about these people, why don't they share it with us, these wonderful nonprofits? The people I've interacted very much feel the same way. Their lawyers, however, would have a conversation about that. So
Yeah. I'm a fan of it, even as a fundraiser and someone where like a lot of our revenue comes from repeated gifts. I love when it's very obvious and kind of difficult sometimes even to share a certain amount of information with a charity. I think it should be like a very conscious decision. There's some slippery stuff that I think happens in terms of data collection. I want to kick one over to Garrison. So can you talk more about non-cash asset donations? And is that crypto or other things? So this is something on like crypto, I think from all the other conversations, the tax incentive and the drivers behind it and what motivates donors to give, like you own this area, but then there's also that interesting vector in crypto. That's NFT fundraising and Web3. And like you said, Gitcoin, there's technological reasons for using it that go beyond kind of the tax incentive component. Crypto versus stocks in terms of donor incentives and fundraising. Are there any kind of differences that you'd want to speak to?
Yeah, so like that broad kind of category of non-cash donations, it's crypto, stocks, uh, donor advised funds. Donor advised funds are interesting because they're so versatile. Like they can be like a giving vehicle that you can donate as a donor, donate cash, stock, uh, or crypto into a donor advised fund. So it's all kind of uh, this kind of interconnected category. And the main kind of value add from a donor perspective is, if you donate, appreciated assets in your portfolio, regardless of if it's stock or crypto, you're able to reduce your tax burden because you don't have to pay the capital gains tax on those donations. So what you often see is, especially at like year end fundraising, you might see a more uptick in like major gifts in those donation categories because it's kind of part of, a cycle of like portfolio management and making an impact at the same time. I do think, one thing I'll touch on briefly is like the notion of like time in the space, because when you're dealing with assets that go up and down in value, from a non-profit perspective, especially if you haven't really engaged in that space, it could be intimidating. And luckily, there's a lot of great solutions out there that make it easy for donors to, donate non-cash assets in a way that's easy for them, also easy for a nonprofit to, kind of, process that revenue without dealing with the volatility. And then, with crypto, you have like market cycles, for example, with like bull and bear markets that are like, recurring. And we see like historical trends of like these like 4-year market cycles. I think at the end of the day, when it comes to asset donations, it's pretty contextual to the donor. Like if their portfolio is performing really well and they have appreciated assets and they're aware of the tax incentive, they're it's one of the most tax efficient ways to give. Um, and it could be pretty difficult to like try to reach every donor, like blanket messaging with that tax incentive, because it's highly contextual to where the donor might be with their portfolio. But I think, with crypto, you even have non-volatile assets that are being donated, like stable coins, which are cryptocurrencies pegged to the value of like the US dollar, for example. That's an increasingly popular donation method in crypto. So it's, there's a lot of different facets to the landscape for sure.
That's an awesome rundown. Um, Only thing that I would add on to that is also just like the ease of use is such a barrier for younger donors. Like this is where the chariot thing comes in, and also stock. So this is one of those things I talked about crypto all day. We do stock and DAF donation processing too. Same thing, just able to send it through a form in a couple clicks, automate everything. I don't care if you end up using it through us or through someone else. I obviously care. It's a bad way of framing it. I'd prefer you use us for these things. But if you are a nonprofit where the only way you take stocks is through a PDF with brokerage instructions, and the only way you take DAF transfers is by sending donors off your site, please revisit that list of innovation priorities that we talked about earlier and move those up the ladder, because I can guarantee that you do not get donations from people under 50 via that donation form. Like, I think people think it's like 20s, 30s type thing. Donors are not going to send you money. And if it's buried on the site, that it's even worse. I think there are some nonprofits who get nothing through a process because it's so broken and they're convinced that no one has stock and there isn't $250 billion sitting in DAFs. And then there's some nonprofits who get kind of a lot, but it's literally only people in their like 60s, 70s, 80s. And they're like, these are the only people who give this way. Not a thing. It's because the form is designed not for people like me who just canceled their life insurance policy because they tried to make me send a check. And I was like, I don't trust you to do anything. Now, how are you managing my personal data? I can't send you a bank transfer. So just as a quick aside on again, it doesn't have to be the giving block, but there are plenty of ways to just automatically accept a stock or a DAF transfer in a few seconds on your site. And they're even using things like AI to like scan how much is in the account and recommend a gift size, add a boost to it, and then track that data right into your database. You don't have to do a forensics work when a stock gift comes in or a check comes from a DAF, and you have to like call and see, was it connected to one donor? Like all of that's been resolved for a long time. And not only does it save you a lot of time, but there's so much money in it. It's not just older people who have all of their wealth in investments. It goes well beyond crypto. Please make all that stuff easy, just because there's so much money. A question now for Hilary. We have a good question. It was from Patrick in the chat. Excellent name. How best to differentiate your nonprofit when so many needs with similar funding goals are in the same area? So you see people at events, you see people in the nonprofit world when you're competing against similar types of organizations, or you're trying to fundraise in an area that people feel is crowded or saturated. Like, what are some of the recommendations you have for orgs in that situation?
Yeah, so if we're talking about local nonprofits, and going back to the idea of influencers and followings, we're seeing a lot of local nonprofits that are partnering together for a project or a marketing campaign who might serve similar audiences, have similar donors, and they're cross-pollinating them by doing things together. So it blows up their reach. So if you have a like-minded nonprofit or somebody in your local nonprofit group, it's definitely worth trying, because you're not just pulling donors away from one another. They're becoming passionate in the cause. So it's one person who's passionate about a cause and is going to support multiple nonprofits. So we've seen a lot of success in doing that, and it helps you kind of grow a little bit bigger than the people who are only promoting themselves.
I think that's a great approach. Let me see. We've got a little over 5 minutes left here. I think that, the local versus kind of larger org perspective is also super important. Unrelated, Garrison, are you in a band? This is a question that we have from Princey.
I am. Very early
love it.
stage. We haven't started playing shows yet, but we're working on some material. But
That's
soon.
sick. I've still never seen you play. We gotta get a link in the chat at some point. Awesome. Do you play guitar and bass?
Yeah, if it has strings, like, yeah. I wouldn't call
sweet.
myself a bassist, but I definitely play bass like a guitar player. But
Nice. Cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. I have an acoustic guitar that I can play 3-4 chord songs on poorly. Here's a question that we have. How might nonprofits evaluate the potential benefits and risks of creating their own tokens as a strategy for long-term sustainability? Would you advise? I would not advise. What I will say on this is the folks that I know who have launched cryptocurrencies and are kind of behind some of the major projects have spent what seems to be an infinite amount of time and money navigating the legal system and trying to think about what this will mean for the different regulatory agencies and how the particular asset will be treated. Will it be a security, not a security? How are we marketing it? How are partners marketing it to ensure that it doesn't end up being something that gets made an example of by the SEC or others at some point in the future? Unless you are designing a cryptocurrency that does things that other cryptocurrencies cannot do to a degree that is obvious and valuable to high-level technologists who operate within this space, okay? And they're like, wow, what a scalable architecture. We've never seen anything like it. If that's the basis of it, then it's something worth exploring and pursuing and talking to investors and legal counsel. If it's to create a spin-off cryptocurrency using the same technology as a kind of get-rich-quick scheme, those tend to go poorly. So I can't say you can or you can't do it. I would just say I've known a few people who've tried to tread into that water, and it's a lot more difficult than I think some people give it credit for. I see, Garrison, you might have something on this too.
Yeah, like, issuing your own tokens and assets to the public is definitely, like you said, Pat, it's definitely pretty can be a regulatory minefield for sure, even if you're approaching it with the best of intentions. And it can be very complicated to do it and do it well. Nonprofits definitely shouldn't create their own, charity coins. For example, I've seen some projects out there that are branded as charity coins, but if you kind of look at the actual substance of what they're doing, it's definitely profit focused, shall we say. I do think, there could be something to explore in terms of like having an on-chain record of impact. If it's like an NFT that's like a proof of impact, like you verifiably did some sort of action on chain, on the blockchain, that everyone can verify. Here's proof that you did that. And whether or not that would be appealing to a donor or not, I don't know. But I think there are ways to experiment with using these protocols that aren't like very obviously kind of, murky waters from a regulatory perspective. But there's a lot you can do without issuing assets. Like the Gitcoin activation we didn't involve any tokens. People donated crypto assets, but there wasn't like an auction or an exchange of virtual currency. Like, oh, because you uh, put money in, here's this random token for you. It's just using the kind of transparent, uh, publicly verifiable payment rails that you can kind of like look and see it all happen in real time, and that's on the record forever. That in and of itself is compelling. You don't have to have speculative assets in the mix, at least creating them when you're engaging with donors.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of tokens out there already. And they can also donate to you. You never want to be convincing. Sometimes nonprofits will ask, like, how do you promote crypto to your donors? It's like, you don't like promote getting into crypto or a particular token or a project. Like, you never want to be giving investment advice or encouraging people to make a choice they wouldn't otherwise be making. But if a project wants to be like, I'm selling off these NFTs and 50% is going to go to this charity, that's awesome, right? Especially after the money has been sent to you, then you can celebrate how much money got sent to you. And that can help an artist build an audience, especially if it's a big nonprofit, and they can make more money off their art into the future and then partner with you again. Like, it can become like a really positive cycle with good intentions. It's just a matter of timing. You don't want to be creating your own thing or promoting something where you don't know what the outcome will be, because there will be projects out there with a profit motive who will just say, we're going to give you, half the tokens we mint. And then a nonprofit goes on Twitter, starts promoting this token. You're kind of encouraging people to buy it. and that becomes dangerous, and then maybe it doesn't even pay off. And now the time and the energy's out there, and there's a brand issue. So if someone wants to go raise some money or do something cool and they want to direct funds to your organization, you can celebrate that the gifts came in and thank the people for it publicly, so long as the project is safe. And just as a quick aside, anyone who's on who is a client of the Giving Block, similar how do you hit support with everything, anytime someone reaches out to you about something like this, just forward it to us immediately, right? We can just do the research for you. Is the project legit? Does this make sense, etc. Off the crypto topic, I want to go Hilary, Mark, then Garrison. Anything you want to leave the audience with today? I want to thank you all for being here, and any closing remarks.
No, I was going to add to that and just say that I can't imagine that it would be easy to explain the development costs around creating something like that to your donors. So for any of these projects, considering that you want your money to go to the mission, not for all of those fun things. But yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think when it comes to like nonprofits that are interested in engaging this space more, there are pretty easy steps. If you're not accepting crypto assets in donations, start by accepting. And then if you want to proactively engage the space, just kind of like learn more about it. And working with like the Giving Block, for example, they can help provide some guidance and advice. A big thing is also like where you're at in the market cycle. I've used that term earlier. I wish I could dig into it more. But, if you're like trying to rally your team around getting into crypto more, but you're but the market's at the bottom of the bear market, it's probably not the best time to like invest a lot of resources and allocate budget towards like paid media campaigns focused on crypto. So there is kind of like a time component into when you want to like very proactively engage. Because as the Giving Block has shown in recent reports, there is a correlation between like market cap and crypto donation volume. So there is kind of like a idea of trying to like position yourself, or not position yourself, but like figure out where you sit. Where does your organization sit in terms of like the timeline of everything? I would love to dig into it further, but yeah, just stay tuned into the space. Like look up CoinDesk and read the headlines. Just very basic stuff to kind of keep a pulse on the space, and that can help inform your decisions.
I appreciate that having us all on here. I think the thing I would leave everyone with is one of the hardest things to do is to consider the ways that your donors want to engage with your organization, not the way that you want to engage with your organization or with other nonprofits. Perhaps the biggest mistake we make in our daily lives, but certainly into our professional lives as well, is viewing things through our lens instead of the lens of our audience. Like, I can't be the only one who struggles deeply to understand donor advised funds and crypto. And like, that shouldn't be a barrier for us trying to understand it if our supporters want to support and engage with us in that way. And that goes for anything, whether it be social media or any of the disruptive fundraising strategies that have been talked about today, is truly try to take that donor-centric lens, which we often do through copywriting, but also thinking through that through technology, people, processes that are new to your organization.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you all for being on today. I think we want to do more of these. Everyone in the audience has been pretty stoked on it. Want to do more topics. I think we want to have all of you back on as speakers, but thank you all for your time.